and Spencer with the City of San Carlos planning staff this evening. We're so glad to see you, and this is our first in-person meeting together.
Okay.
So, and we're going to be doing this going forward. There's been some really great changes that have occurred. So we're glad and very excited to be able to get to know you a little bit better and to have, time together and meet in person. Along the way, if you need to use the restroom, there's restrooms just outside of this room. They're just right across the hall. I mean, you can ask Lynette, she'll point you to them. They're not very far. Just feel free to get up, take a bio break if you need to. If you want more food and you're extra hungry, we have plenty of food. So please, at any time, feel free to get up and get more as you like. So with that, let's go ahead and officially call our meeting to order. I'm going to be walking us through the agenda this evening, and I should step back for just a moment. And for those of you, I just want to just do basic introductions because I may look different in person than on screen. So I just want to take a minute to let you all know that I'm Lisa Porras. I have the pleasure of serving as a planning manager for the City of San Carlos's Advanced Planning Division, and joining me here tonight is Alsa Bay, our Community and Economic Development Director. We also have Aaron Ackman, who is our Strategic Advisor for the Downtown Specific Plan Project. And since we last met, we have a new hire in advanced planning, Akanksha Chopra. She's our new Associate Planner. And then behind the scenes, you may remember Lynette, getting emails from Lynette. You all know Lynette. Lynette is here tonight as well. So thanks for that pause. Okay, meeting is officially called to order. Because we're a Brown Act committee, we have certain protocols. So please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. And now we'll begin with roll call. So let me just go down the list. Allie Board, Donna Lira here. Thank you. Allison Chang, I'm sorry. Chang, we'll fix that. Tom Davids. Here. Anthony Cam is not here tonight. Dean Denner. Here. Eugene, Mark Maxwell. Here. Amy Buckmaster. Here. Madison Blanton. Madison's not here tonight. Samina Ginwala and Maya Neighbor. I know they both RSVP. They may be joining us a little bit late, but they're not here at the moment. Sri Charan is not here. I don't think we got an RSVP from him. And Monette Meredith, great. And Joaquin Pedron is not here tonight. James Bertram, present. Thank you. Cecile Lee here, great. Tracy Massaro, not here. No, and Elizabeth Min here. Hi, Elizabeth. Great. Well, thank you. So let's go ahead and get into our agenda for this evening. We essentially have three main topics that we want to walk you through this evening, and we'll have an opportunity to have questions and comments as we walk through these three components of tonight's agenda. If there's any questions or perspectives or thoughts or shares that the DTAC may have, we'll have a moment and an opportunity to dive into that. I think the area where we'll spend most of our time kind of digging into some information has to do with our work in progress. And then we have an interactive exercise that we want to do tonight based upon some of the homework that we received regarding your thoughts about a future vision for the downtown and the guiding principles, principles are things that we value the most, or our philosophy, or basically what we lead with in developing goals, policies, and action items for the downtown specific plan. So we'll talk a little bit about the policy framework, dive into we'll share what we've received, and then we'll get feedback from you all. So if some of you, we all have busy lives, and I understand that if you haven't had a chance to turn that in and you have some thoughts, it's definitely not too late. You are still welcome. We are at the very beginning stages where we're calling this a working draft that we're going to share tonight. And we'll definitely want to build on that. And it could end up to be, quite different or expanded, and we'll see how that goes. And then we also want to introduce to you another component of the work that we are really seriously thinking about is changes to other streets in the downtown. As you all know, we've been talking a lot about the 700 block, but if you've heard from the public comments, I think there was almost like a 200-page, really big summary to date that includes all of the surveys. I think it's available on our website now. It will be very soon. You'll be able to kind of look through there at your leisure, but we've heard so much from the community about what about all the other streets. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight and kind of start getting, some feedback as far as what's possible, and also how we're going to study each of the different street segments and different scenarios for those that will help inform the eventual scenario or modifications to streets that we want to move forward with. So that'll all be part of the process that we get to look at together. So it's been a while since we last met on January 25th on screen and online. And so since that time, we wanted to provide you with a project update about what we've done since that time. And so much of what we've done had to do with getting public feedback, and including feedback from our Planning and Transportation Commission, as well as our City Council, so that we can get direction on what were some of sort of the components of the downtown that were kind of like most wanting attention, like what to do with the 700 block and what role can the alley play, and should we redesign Frank Harrington, and what do we need to be thinking about in terms of this new public plaza opportunity. So following the DTAC meeting that we had with you and all the great feedback that we received at our online meeting, we held a community workshop. Some of you might have attended that workshop in February earlier this year. We followed that by an in-person opportunity. So every step of the way, public participation for our downtown is a very high priority. It's part of what we value that is going to really shape the development of the downtown specific plan. I mean, we view the downtown as everybody's downtown. This is our community's epicenter, if you will, where people come together and spend time and enjoy their city. So we're really looking to do everything we can to make sure everyone knows about this project and has an opportunity to give us their feedback. And with all of that, we can really help create a plan that's representative of this community. So we had an in-person event called that Coffee and Comments, March 4th. We had a great turnout. And then we followed that by a survey, and the survey was out for at least a couple of months, I think. And we got a lot of good feedback there. So we took all of that feedback and we compiled it and presented it to the Planning and Transportation Commission in April. And then we went to City Council in April as well. There are essentially meetings that we held 1 week apart. So with all that information, we got some really good feedback and direction from the council, which is to lead with, what we can call for now 3 big moves. This is the first set of interventions, if you will. These are not the only set, but this is the first set. So we got direction from the council, given all the community input, that the 700 block of Laurel Street should be permanently closed and transformed into a complete public plaza. And then with the public gathering spaces, the council agreed that Frank Harrington was quite dated, and there really are opportunities to refresh that space, open it up, redesign it, and design it in a way that is interacts with and is part of the 700 block closure, because Frank Harrington is on the 700 block. So they can really be interrelated in a great way. And then also some good feedback for this new public plaza opportunity that we have on the 600 block, which is right next to the Wheeler parking garage and on, fronts onto the street. So we got some good feedback there. And then of course, improvements to the alleys. The alleys need to be cleaned up, organized, improved aesthetically, and really play an important role in supporting the downtown plan. So I know you've seen these pictures before, but this is what we shared with the Planning Commission and City Council. And this is not the final graphic, if you will, but it is the inspiration for what a full public plaza can look like. And designing of that space and what will go into the space is part of the work that we will now lead off with. And then Frank Harrington Park, you may remember all of these 3 different options where one was kind of like a combination of this urban feeling plaza combined with natural elements that are more park-like, places for children to play. One version that was more, just really open and a complete urban plaza with a larger fountain concept kind of meeting the 700 block and extending out a little bit into that. And then the third idea was really about, kind of celebrating the history of using the space for music and really incorporating music and stage. And our planning and city council members really liked all of those ideas. And it's not like we've landed on one, but we're going to be looking at all of these elements and how we can move forward with those and furthering the design of those spaces. And then with alleys, these are some pictures that we showed the Planning Commission and City Council, which I don't believe we showed the DTAC, but through our research, we're just finding more and more wonderful examples of like how beautiful alleys can be, how they can be cleaned up, beautified, and really provide kind of like a backbone circulation component for a downtown setting, how trash enclosures can be tucked inside spaces and that they can be really beautified. So we have a great alley network, as you all know. I mean, the boats are there, but they definitely some attention. And so we're going to be building off of that. And so when we went to the Planning and Transportation Commission on April 17th, I just wanted to provide you with a couple of highlights. Most of them were in favor of the full plaza option, although some of them did consider, well, what would it be like to have the wider sidewalk, but most were in favor of the full plaza. And then with respect to the alleys, they recognize that the alleys are really critical components to the success of the Laurel Street closure. And that whatever we do, the alleys, really have to be function and work well. They'll have to do everything. And how are we going to handle that? So that's kind of a big lift we have in front of us. But we can definitely address that, and we'll be working on that as the plan evolves. And then with public gathering spaces, definitely from the Planning Commission, really agree that Frank Harrington can be opened up, that the new plaza off the 600 block could be kind of like this gateway feature coming out of the Wheeler parking garage and really kind of entering into our downtown space. They love the idea for programming these spaces with music, making sure that there's shade and trees, water features, lighting, just really all the components. Like if we had to decorate it ourselves, we'd all say, okay, trees, get the lights, get the music, but put it out there in a permanent way. And then when we went to the city council, because our city council, as we all know, is the ultimate decision-making body for adopting the downtown plans, really hearing, the community's vision and then taking action on it. So before we go and do further designing with all of this in mind, we needed to get the green light from the council, because if they were not in agreement or felt we should be moving in a different direction regarding these elements, then we'd have to kind of like rewind and do it all over again. So this was an important check-in with the city council. It's kind of like a really great milestone. So they were all in favor of permanently closing the 700 block. They recognize the alleys are going to need to be the workforce of the downtown to really accommodate all the deliveries, but also providing and connecting, being a connector to the downtown. We're definitely in agreement that we need to do a lot with all of those. With the public gathering spaces, they mentioned, public restrooms, and that as we make these spaces more available and inviting to the public, we need to provide some practical components. Welcome, Maya and Samina, feel free to grab some food. It's really informal here, so, just help yourself. It's right there in the back. But yeah, that we should definitely be activating the space, Shakespeare in the Park ideas. And one of the things that they said that's really interesting, and we think about it as planners as well, is be careful not to design everything, because we want to allow ourselves some time to grow into things. So we can start with the basics and then we can add on, but not over design where maybe it's harder to take something away to make space for something new that you may want. So this is a 20-year plan. So as we think about improvements to these areas, we're going to be thinking about making sure that these spaces can evolve and that they're not too overly designed. So that's kind of like our first update. And I just wanted to take a pause. If there's no questions or comments on that, a lot of this may be familiar, but if there's anything that you would like to share, I'm going to ask, and you can just raise your hand. But if there's none, no pressure, we can definitely move on to the next, but we do have a question from James.
Yeah, it is Jim, by the way, so.
Yeah,
before
sorry.
Jim, I can kind of look around. So there was a meeting with the landlords and merchants on the
Yes,
streets.
I'm gonna get to that next. Yeah, so all of this happened before we went to the business community.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, it looks like I can move on. Okay, I'll move on. Okay, so yes, great segue.
Set you up.
Following the council's decision on April the 24th, we knew we needed to meet with the business community because now that we had some direction about the closure of the 700 block, we felt like we need to take this to the business community and have a conversation and really hear from them about their needs, how we could support them, you know, what concerns they might have, you know, what are their thinking and their perspectives. Although, you know, they've all been invited, they're aware about this project. Sometimes we find that we really need to take the extra effort and go to a particular stakeholder or interest group or focus group to really kind of dive in. And as you know, it's easier to kind of have these conversations face to face. So what we ended up doing is our staff split into teams or split up, and we went door to door to every business in the downtown plan area. And I think there's about 150 different businesses in the downtown. So some folks were available, we had conversations, some weren't. We left a flyer, we told them we were doing a business survey, and we, you know, basically left information to let them know where we were going to be having this meeting. So out of all of that effort, about 23 folks participated at the meeting. And when we went to the meeting, we wanted to share a little bit about the downtown composition. It feels like if we mainly go to the 700 block, then we would say, oh, all of downtown is mostly restaurants. But actually, what we're finding is, yes, it's true. Most of the businesses in the downtown specific plan area are mostly in the food and beverage industries, about 39%. But following that is the retail sector, which is just a little over 29% of the business composition in downtown. And then we also have personal services like nail salons, dry cleaners, things like that, and professional services that are more kind of like office related. And then there's this other category called other. But we thought it would be interesting to kind of share that, you know, there actually is quite some diversity in our downtown area when we stop and take a close look. And so when we went to the meeting, we asked them 4 questions. We shared, we gave a presentation and we shared the ideas for a full public plaza, excuse me. And then we shared the idea about the alleys and the parks and the plazas. And then we said, okay, so what can the city do in the meantime? You know, what should the priorities be now that we know we're going forward with these components in mind? How should we prioritize, you know, some business needs, or what are the concerns of the business? What's most important for the success of their business? And, you know, how can, you know, what are the needs of their employees? So we kind of led with these 4 questions as icebreakers to kind of get some feedback. And what we heard, kind of going door to door, and again at the meeting, we actually heard quite a lot. So we want to share this with the downtown, with the DTAC, because you're our main advisory committee. We come to you first with all of the ideas. Once we have them, you're usually our first stop. There was one time we went to had a community workshop first and then went to the DTAC, but normally we come to you first. And that's how we like to do it. So we want to share with you what the business community is saying. And one of the things that we heard a lot about were the parklets and the way that the farmers market is set up. And essentially that these structures, if you will, are blocking the visibility to their storefronts. They didn't like that. They felt they had some really big concerns about that. They're also wondering, you know, what is the city's plan about parklets? You know, it's been some time since 2020, 21, we're now going into 2023, the end of 23 pretty soon. We'll blink and it'll be the fall. But what's our plan for parklets? They also felt that parking, the signage to direct people to where we have parking isn't really working. Then the parking that we have, there seems to be kind of lack of enforcement. We also even heard comments that the city doesn't seem to care about the needs of the retail businesses. Everything seems to be more slanted towards the restaurants. So we're receiving this information. from them. They also felt that the diagonal parking, along San Carlos Avenue, those first 2 blocks when you enter off of El Camino, kind of feels unsafe, and the backing up, and some cars are really big, and it's just kind of feels unsafe. And a lot of people don't feel comfortable actually eating in the parklets that are on San Carlos Avenue. They also shared that there's no space for kind of like the deliveries, the basic DoorDash and Uber Eats, kind of picking up food and taking them elsewhere. They expressed concerns about, what happens when all of the construction eventually takes place to transform the downtown. How can the city support businesses during that time? We also heard that there's a need for diversity of businesses, which, we want to hear and learn more, and we'll talk to this committee about what's missing in the downtown, like what kind of uses would be great to have in our downtown that we don't have now. Folks also felt that it was, a bit unsafe to park in Sam Terran's garage. I personally haven't been up in there, but I'm going to check. But I did hear from Samtrans that they fixed some lighting, but that it felt quite high, people didn't really feel safe using the elevators and going into dimly lit spaces. So I would say that their top concerns, and we shared this in a city council newsletter. I'm not sure how many of you are signed up to receive the city council newsletter, but every couple of weeks, the city issues a newsletter that is, the primary audience is the city council, yes, but it also goes out to the entire community. And it's just a great way to stay up to date, from, it's like twice a month, you get to hear about all kinds of things happening in the city. So it's a really great resource. I mean, you can go to eNotify on the city's website and sign up. So we presented a short piece about what we heard from the business community in the city council newsletter. So it's all out there, and the information here on the screen is part of that. But what people's primary top concerns or big takeaways are that the different blocks in and around the downtown should have the same economic opportunity as a 700. So if the 700 is really being beautified and closed and treated, with all these elements that we've been talking about, what about the other blocks? And we don't want to see the other blocks struggle. And we'll talk about that tonight, because 700 block is not going to be the only block. They also mentioned parklets. So parklets are a really big concern. That was definitely underscored. And allowing, and how long will they be allowed for, and aren't they temporary? What are we going to do about that? They really felt parking, signage for parking. We need to improve, the placement of parking signage, so as folks are driving throughout our downtown, they know exactly where to park. And they also wanted to see more bicycle racks. So like in their interim, the comments in response to what we can do in the interim really had to do about parklets, and can we get some more bicycle parking out there, and can we get some better signage, like things that we can do in the interim. So, and we will be working on this, and some of the, I should just say that a lot of these concerns will be addressed in the downtown specific plan. But in the meantime, we also have a working group internally to see what we can do in the meantime. And staff has been meeting to talk about that. And we reminded them to also take the survey. So here's one area where we could use the DTAX help. So if any of you have business contacts or networks or people with businesses in the downtown, if you're out and about, or the next time you might visit their business, let them know that there's a survey for businesses on sancarlosdowntownplan.com on our website. It's right there. And we want them to take the survey. We have about 24 responses. There's 150 businesses. We'd like to get some more. So this is one area where we can definitely use your help next time you're out of downtown. So I'm going to take a pause there and see if there's any questions. We'll start with Mark.
So it sounded like there was some pretty polarized feedback on parklets. Were those coming equally from restaurants and non-restaurants, or are we seeing kind of divide between restaurants and retail, or restaurants and everybody else?
So the question is, are we seeing any, where are the comments coming from with respect to concerns about parklets? Is it mostly retail operators, or is it restaurant operators? And I would say it's mostly retail. The restaurant operators, you know, they listened, they were obviously representative at the meeting. We had both you know, good representation from the retail side and good representation from the restaurant side. And you know, we even heard some interesting comments from some restaurant operators, you know, basically saying that the reason they decided to put a parklet in place because all of a sudden everyone was doing it. And so they thought, well, you know, it's kind of like keeping up with the Joneses. You also felt like it was important to kind of, you know, kind of level the playing field and also do a parklet as well. But some of them, the restaurant operators said, well, maybe I really don't even need it, but you know, they just put it. Amy, you were there at the meeting.
I was representing the chamber and also the BTEC member and, you know, and it was true. There were restaurateurs who said, I'm happy to give up my parklet. To be frank, it's actually quite a bit of work and to maintain, and we are over, you know, I don't need this. And I want to help my neighbors who need this space and the parking beside me. So I was really proud of that member of ours who spoke up and was very honest. And it was a mix. I think it was the retail side and the professional side, but it was also more of an equitable piece of please don't just invest in 700. Please look out for 600 and invest and look at us. And I think that's kind of what I took away from it. And I think the city was really open to the idea of, you know, this, and when I spoke as a chambers, this is a strategy. So it's a long-term strategy, but please, I kept circling this one question that the city asked is, what can we do in the meantime? You know, that what can the city do? And I think the one issue is the parklet situation. If they're not being used, you know, why are they taking up space for the retail? So some of those quick fixes and economic stat, that kind of thing. So I was really impressed with what, you know, everybody tried to work together. And I think the big picture was the equitable piece.
So was it 600 and 800 or primarily 600?
It was 600, 800, but the main goal was to just not, one thing that St. Cross has is you do have such amazing retail and you don't want to use that. And I think you have to make sure, and right now, the other factor that from the chamber we spoke of, you're in some serious economic times. So they're not just facing, you know, they're facing economic downturn. So you have to, what can the city do right now to help them?
Well, I'll take your question.
So
And
that's
also, I know
it was
Erin would like to add a couple of things as well, but do you want to ask your question real quick,
Well, mine
Samina?
was related to what Amy was talking about. So basically, like, I know that from my perspective, like San Carlos is known for like their food. Like I have friends from like Milpitas, Los Gatos that come to the restaurants. So maybe it's more of like a marketing issue or like just getting the retail stores' names out there. Because I know that like restaurants have been doing this for a long time and they're like they know how to market. There's I think like if anyone has heard the show Diners, Drive-In and Dives, there's a restaurant on downtown that Guy visited. So there's a lot of stuff.
Two.
Oh, two. Okay, sorry. I didn't know. This was
Two restaurants.
He started with Refuge.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I know that there's like a lot of activity around restaurants and maybe like encouraging better marketing or like other means of
Stopping and
advertising.
dining.
Yeah,
That
that type of kind of.
Yeah, great. Erin, did you want to?
Yeah, like and a lot of the retailers who had concerns about the parklets, it wasn't necessarily the fact that there was parklets, a lot of it was a design issue.
Yes.
The fact that they have they were walled off and it's kind of created its own inside space on the outside. And just the vibe that creates, number one, but also just really just a practical, it's blocking the view of my store. So not only are the restaurants getting additional space, they're also taking away eyes from my store. So I think it was, I think they're going to compromise along the way, but the design issue seemed to be paramount over the actual just having parklets.
Yeah, it is hard to look in.
Yeah.
You know, when you're looking in to see what's there and it's
Yeah,
a visual perspective.
And we heard a lot about that, especially interestingly enough, but especially on the 700 block where you know how it all feels. We all been there, so you know how it is to walk down the center And there's, you know, parklet after parklet with their shades and the roof, and you can't really see the storefronts. So if you're looking for a restaurant, you're like, which parklet is that? So, and you're right, Erin, that I think for me as well, and a lot of folks at City Hall, we had Public Works attend the meeting. We had, Public Works Maintenance attend, we had PD attend, you know, all of us were there. So it's a good representation between planning and engineering, and that's our biggest takeaway. It really has to do with the design of the parkland. So going forward, you know, this is something that we're going to need to look at and integrate into the specific plan to provide some guidance, and maybe even before, you know, the planning.
And I think you will, if it's before the plan, just for safety issues. I don't.
Yeah. Monette?
Yeah, well, I, a question that's related to that, it feels almost like you're walking down an alley in the middle. And it just becomes an open thing for skateboarders and bikes, you know, with seeing just backs of all the restaurants and not really seeing. It's not an invitation to the restaurants from the middle. It's the back of them. But my question is, what was Sneakers' logic for taking theirs down? Because Sneakers had that beautiful one on the 600 block and it's gone. And I was curious why they got rid of their parklet.
Does anybody know?
They're under new ownership, right? So the original owner sold it. Sold this, and so the new business owners, I think, are rethinking what they're gonna do there. Or how, yeah, so it could be just the new ownership is kind of reassessing. They may go back out there. We're not quite sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was learning the same thing, then realized that someone drove me out. So don't go there. Most of it's sad, really like, and most of the tenants of the clientele didn't have a problem at all. We still have plenty of seating, and there's I think dollars involved in leasing this. I don't know. Thank you. I don't know what they pay, but the gentleman who runs the place says we can't afford it anymore. We gotta cut some costs, and it's one of them. So bottom line, I think they're happy, and I haven't talked to any of the clientele who've been disappointed.
Donna?
Is there time to come back with more information or discussion about this? Where is this just information for right now?
This is just an update. We wanted to let you know, we went to the business community and what their concerns are. So we're internally, basically, we gathered the information in terms of what is a lot of questions were about what the process is. And so the city, just to kind of summarize this, we have an outdoor dining and sidewalk permit, which is, retailers or restaurant operators can have some space right on the sidewalk. And we've had this in place for many, many years in San Carlos. And then the city decided to move forward with a pilot program where 3 restaurants could participate and, do a parklet on the street. And then
That was pre-COVID.
that was pre-COVID, and then COVID happened, and then we all know what happened thereafter. So I really felt it was important to share this with the DTAC to let you know what the top concerns are and some of the things that we're going to be looking at as we continue to develop solutions to all of this. But these are important components of the space planning that we need to do. So they'll definitely need to look at that. And Maya, you have one more question.
I recently talked to some of the older kind of members of the community, and another concern that they had about kind of closing off the 700 block was accessibility. They said that a lot of older folks won't make an effort to walk down just because it's more challenging, and they're kind of worried about kind of the older representation on the design aspect of this, because usually people will just drive and park to where they need to go and take a few steps out of their car and get there. So just accessibility was a concern.
Yeah, and we are definitely going to be looking at that. And this is part of the work in progress as we think about parking, what type of parking spaces we have, and what we need, what kind of parking spaces we need and where. So I'll be getting to that in just a minute. So are there any more questions? And if not, we will move on to the next piece, which is work in progress. So here's what we're working on right now. And these are really exciting studies that we have just started, or we actually started a month ago or so. And these are really going to help inform the development of the plan and help us solve some of these challenges, these questions we have about parking, about mobility, what happens when we close the street, how are pedestrians, bicyclists, and cars going to maneuver? What are we doing with the parking we have? What kind of parking management may we need to help support all of these new transformations and making sure there's access and availability to these wonderful spaces that we're creating? Well, this is the reason why we're diving deeper into traffic and parking studies at this time. So I wanted to share with you some information about the traffic study that we have underway. The traffic study is going to look at a total of 30 intersections and street segments in the plan area. We're going to be looking at existing conditions. And by the way, let me just back up a minute. When I mentioned traffic study in the profession, traffic means not just vehicles, but also pedestrians and bicyclists. I myself, when I think of traffic, I think of just vehicles. But this traffic study, when one is done professionally in the field, it always includes pedestrian and bicyclists. So it's just something really good to kind of keep in the back of your mind. So yes, we're going to be looking at traffic operations, how the traffic operates at all of these different intersections. And then we're going to get those existing counts. And then we're going to layer over that, future possible scenarios. So the scenarios that we're going to look at is what happens with traffic, all of these different modes of travel when we close the 700 block. Where does traffic go? And of course, that's going to be part of our existing conditions because that's been in place. So we're looking at this right now. And then we're also going to look at, well, what would happen if the 700 and the 600 block were completely closed? What happens with traffic in that scenario? And then we're going to look at the 600 and 700 both closed and what we call a road diet on San Carlos Avenue. And I'm going to show you some examples of what that means. But when a traffic lane goes on a diet, if you will, it becomes less wide and more narrow. And with that space that is captured, we can do, we can accomplish some other objectives like making our sidewalks wider. We can make space for bicycle lanes. We can maneuver the parking from diagonal to parallel to make it feel safer and still have room for the bus to go through, bus stops and all these other things like fixtures and trees and things that we want to make our downtown beautiful and inviting and welcoming. So we're going to be looking at that scenario. And then the fourth option is just looking at closure of the 700 block and the road diet on the first two blocks of San Carlos Avenue. So all of I should say that these scenarios will help us as a community and as a city with our decision makers decide, which scenario or which parts, which closures, which road diets, which one do we feel most comfortable with? There may be some areas where maybe we lose, some things, or maybe it takes a little bit longer for cars to get through. But on the other hand, we have more space for bicyclists and pedestrians and really, are able to upgrade the look and feel of our streets. So we would consider those, the pros and the cons, and be able to really be informed and make an informed decision about what direction we want to go. So this traffic study, all of the results of this are eventually going to be shared with the DTAC, and we can look at that together and think about that and what we may want for our city. The traffic study is also going to look at what we refer to as vehicle miles traveled. So how long, how many miles are people traveling based upon all of the uses in the downtown? We're going to be doing a comparative analysis of all the different modes of travel for each scenario that I just walked through. And then all of that is going to be put together in a report. And the timeline for that was we started in June and we'll finish in November, but we should have the scenario results on like how these streets are operating by sometime August, September. So we'll be able to come back to the DTAC and share that with you. So I think this is really great because we want to know the answers to this. We know there's going to be questions. What happens to traffic? What happens to circulation? You know, what happens when we start closing things and narrowing lanes and doing all these things? So we're gonna be able to have the answers to that. So that's really exciting to be able to share that this work is underway, and we'll be able to bring that back to the DTAC.
Quick question.
Yes,
Do those studies also include like stoplight flow and timing,
stoplights.
flow and timing?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Because it's okay on San Carlos Avenue, but it is terrible on Holly Street. I think it's backed up at weird times and normal times. And you think this is not a very good thoroughfare. So I'm just curious if that study's gonna take those into consideration. And is
Yes,
there another entity you have to deal with on, considering changing that flow?
With El Camino Real, so El Camino Real, the timing of the signalization is not controlled by the city. We would have to work with Caltrans to modify those. The good news is we have some new staff on board, our traffic engineers that are have a lot of expertise and, you know, relationships with Caltrans, so we can think about how we could go about, to what degree can we modify those? We're going to be looking at that, but all 30 intersections, including the ones on Holly Street, you'll see they're all kind of numbered here on the slide, and you have these all in your packet. You can take that away. But yeah, we're actually looking at every single intersection. So it's really exciting. We'll be able to, when someone asks what happens to Holly and Walnut, we'll know, we'll have answers to all that.
So will this study also take into account the different times of the day and different days of the week? And of course, seasonal, like right now is light traffic because of summertime, kids are not in school, but things will change, it just depends.
Yeah.
Like,
That's absolutely a very great question, and that is something that is emphasized by our consultant. We really want to make sure we're doing the counts on an average day. We don't want to do it on a day where, like the school is out. So that was something that they started early on. So that the counts have already actually been collected. So they're not collecting them now after school is out. So it was really important to do that during, just your basic, average daily kind of activities that take place. So we wanted to make sure we captured that. So yes, so we definitely looked at that. Donna?
one last question, sorry, go ahead. So it takes into account bicyclists. What about kids that ride their scooter?
I don't believe it has the micro mobility, but it's definitely looking at bicyclists. Yeah.
And really naive to understand how the traffic study was done. Was it with non-cameras temporarily? Was it those roads you see go across the road and count cars? And how was this done?
I'll have to ask our traffic consultant for those details, but I don't know if Aaron or Al, do you remember what Mark said, how he collected those?
Normally what they do is both, so they do hand counts. A lot of times people will stand out there and count turning movements, and they'll have a little, thing in there. And then they also have, for volume, they put the rope across the street, but for the turning movements, they have to have a person. Most of the time you'll see somebody, making counts or sitting there and watching.
Yeah, so we recently had a lot of folks out and around in our downtown. I don't know if anybody noticed, and sometimes they do use cameras for like the parking occupancy study. I'm going to talk about parking next.
Best job for an intern.
Pardon? Yes.
An intern.
Yeah, there are companies that do just this. And I often wonder, like, how do they do all this? It just seems like so dynamic. How are you counting all this? It's quite remarkable, actually. But they have a system in place. So the other component of our work in progress is working on a parking study, a parking occupancy study. How often are the parking spaces used? What's the turnover? And this study will eventually lead into strategies on how we manage our parking, how we can plan for more parking or a different type of parking to serve our needs. Essentially what the parking study will include is an inventory of the full supply of parking in our downtown area. So we're counting parking spaces that are on the street and on property, on lots, on individual lots, including all of the parking garages. We're going to be documenting the type of parking. Is this a parking space that's unregulated? You can park for, all week long or 2 weeks long, or is this time limited? Is the parking space consist of a loading space? How many loading spaces do we have? What are accessible spaces? How many compact spaces do we have in our downtown for motorcycle parking? How many are carpool? So we'll not only count them, but we're gonna, characterize them or categorize these parking spaces. And then also the study will look at our occupancy. So they're going to be looking at, kind of like how at any given time, on any given day, and making sure it's not on a day where everyone's off and not a regular day, but they actually look to see how our parking is being utilized. And Mark, you had a question.
If this is for a 20-year plan, will they factor in EV charging?
Yes, they're going to be factoring in that and factoring future demand. So there's a lot of analysis that will support, existing demand and future demand. Amy?
I was gonna quick question. Surprise is not paid parking, right?
We do not.
You do not.
We do not. No paid
Why our
parking.
restaurants are so popular?
I know. But would that be factored in a 20-year plan?
It could be that that's something that we're gonna look at. So those would be parking management strategies.
Okay, that's.
And in some other
That-
cities,
that.
and if you're really into thinking about paid parking, there's a really well-known and recognized person in the planning profession called Donald Shoup, and he wrote a book, and it's called Concha,
High cost of
The High Cost of Free Parking. So for those of you who are really curious about this, but essentially, they adjust it to the point where, you can always basically find a space. So there's a lot of art in it, and it's not permanent. It can be adjusted and it fluctuates. But in our city, it hasn't been a conversation that we've had. So it's something that we could take a look at. If it means making parking more available, and if it's something the city finds that it wants to do, and the community, we decide as a community we want to do that, that's something that we can look at. So as I mentioned before, we're going to look at our current demand. We're also going to look at future demand. It's a 20-year plan, and we'll be coming up with a set of parking management strategies. And this will be all developed into a downtown parking management plan. This one is going to run alongside the development of the downtown plan. So a lot of this study and work will feed into the downtown plan along the way. But we'll be able to dive into some of the outcomes of the parking study once we have that complete. Monette.
So everybody I know, and we're an older group, complains that the parking, even when it's available in Wheeler, that the spaces are way too narrow. And that we know a lot of people who refuse to park in there because there is not enough room for their car without thinking that the next guy's gonna bang their door in their car, or going to take your mirrors. And I just feel like, maybe it'll show that those spaces aren't being used, they're available. But there's rationale for why they're not being used, and that should be factored in.
That's really good input, and see, because that's exactly right. We may find that some spaces aren't being utilized, but it's really a great comment that, from your own experience and the people that you talk to let the city know why people aren't parking in those spaces. Yeah.
Similar point that I found is, a lot of places say no parking 24 hours a day, throughout towing, right?
Yes.
I'll give you an example, Chase Bank. I mean, nobody banks there after, 5 o'clock, right? I mean, the bank's closed. And I just have to ask the branch managers, would they ever consider saying, putting the time, no parking 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. She said, yeah, we would consider that. She probably wasn't a decision maker, she's branch manager. But that opens up a lot of parking for restaurants right across the street. After 5 to 6 o'clock, is that being looked at, going directly to the property owners and holders?
Yeah, we're going to be
Open
looking
up
at the
deeper.
parking spaces on private property, and the banks are like the perfect example where, after 5 p.m. or whatever time that the spaces are, although reserved for the bank, but they're not being utilized. And so that could be a strategy that the city could go forward and see if we can develop some partnerships and collaboration with these private property owners to open up their spaces for a certain period of time.
On that same note, the alley on the 700 block in the very first part by the post office. It's, you know, where there's that little plaza that has pizza guys and whatever. Well, on the alley, those 6, 7 slots have the big $325 fine if you post that. And yet that, I don't know if that's the property of the little shopping area. Or who that property owner is that can do that, that's not public parking.
Exactly right, and we hear that the alleys are it's very confusing, you know, when you go there and if you're a visitor. You know, it's hard to know, is it okay to park here but not there, you know, it's not delineated in a very clear way. So this is part of the work that
And
needs to.
it's not even adjacent to any particular property. You know, it's on the alley.
What's behind the property?
That's strict law. It's a strict
Yeah.
law.
No, it's outside the shopping, that little plaza shopping.
There's like
Yeah,
six of them,
it's
right?
between
And
the
then-
bank and that little shopping
And
center.
that
There's-
little shopping
yeah.
center, it's on the alley and there's like 6 great spots. And you can't park there. Because it has the 300, you know, if you park, you're gonna get a $325 fine. And so it's not particularly attached to a building on.
It's not readily
Or,
evident.
or obvious.
Yeah, it's
who
not
owns
obvious
it.
who
It
it's-
feels, and it feels to people like that because the alley is a public way that parking should be. But because it's not attached to a building, and so that's very
Yeah.
deceptive.
It must be private, would be my guess is why they have that sign, because if it was a public space, the city wouldn't have a sign on that area. But that area is gonna be, you know, all the spaces, every space is gonna be accounted for. And, you know, evaluated, looked at, investigated, so we'll be able to get some clear divinity in terms of what belongs where. Or who owns which parking.
And as what's highlighted, there are like 4 spots behind the Harrington Park. That are city spots. That.
Yeah, they're public,
Yeah,
they're public
flat,
spots.
but
Yeah,
spots.
I've been lucky enough to be able to park there real quick, go get my salad from Mama Coco's and leave on my lunch day. Exactly. Yeah, those are great, but you know, like, that's wonderful to have, like, some very short-term, quick turnaround parking, just to be able to get in and out.
I just had a question with, follow up with Gina and Erin. So it's not an age thing because I have no peripheral vision, so I always park a wheeler, but there are many times I'm over the line, so don't feel bad. And it is tight, and that's what I wondered was that, when that was built, it's a city garage, but was that because you had to get a certain amount of spaces in that garage to fill the project? That's what I was questioning, so like, I didn't know.
The
if that's-
Wheeler parking garage?
Yeah, so that's, because it is really tight. in
Why is
there.
it striped so narrow? I think is the question.
Yes,
Yeah.
because most of the average cars can get in there, so in a future development, is that, or is it something?
Yeah,
There is a development requirement, because I have a friend who's building a place right now.
So that's what I was just,
And
you have to have a certain per
To
square.
have X amount of space
There's, yeah,
that he's gonna put in one of those things.
and I know they're really tight on
Full
that.
of
so.
cars, so.
Now, the parking count, you know,
Oh, I know.
it's defined by how many units, right? And, you know, and then there's space parking requirement. And then there's parking requirements based upon a certain, you know, the square footage of a non-residential or the commercial use, all of that combined together, pretty much. Anything you would like to add about?
No, I mean, every zoning code basically has 2 things, is how many spaces you have to have for a unit or commercial space, and then how big each space has to be. Some of that is changing because of state laws, but in general, those are kind of the 2 components, so yeah, that's my, yeah, you're like having, so.
Yeah, we just tried to get as many spaces as we could, based on the minimum.
Okay.
Of, it's like 8.5 feet wide by 19 feet long is the measurement, is the standard parking space. You know, we do have SUVs, a lot of people do have larger and wider cars these days, and trucks and stuff, and I know it's really hard to park in there. And it's very underutilized for a number of different reasons. So this comment is a good one. So maybe there should be you know how you go somewhere and it says compact space, but you park in there anyway? I mean, I parked in a million compact
Yes,
spaces.
I have.
But maybe we really do look at that. Maybe these are just compact spaces and we need some bigger spaces. We would be eliminating parking if we were to resize those spaces. But maybe that's what we need to do. If it's, if there's a 20% increase in usage or 30%, then maybe we need to lose a few parking spaces, and that's not off the table.
Or senior parking, or.
Yes, certain parking in front or 20 minutes over here. Yeah,
But that's what I hear too from.
And
yeah, I agree. They're too narrow.
oops. And speaking of Wheeler parking garage, I did have an update for you this evening. The city recently installed some really beautiful murals, color coded the parking levels and provided some directional signage. So if you go into Wheeler parking garage, you will see some of these beautification components that were recently installed in the garage area. So help people navigate, remember where they park, color coded, it's something that has been in the works. And it really kind of helps, beautify and lift up and give some direction for people when they do park in their garage, where to go for the shopping and dining and some basic signage. So that just recently went in. So next time you're walking by, you can definitely check it out. Samina?
I think also part of the problem is like just kind of accessibility with parking, but also like everyone assumes that there won't be parking downtown because chances are when you go downtown, there's not very many spots. So I know like at least in my family and my friends, we don't even like attempt to go park downtown. We just park somewhere else and then walk. And then I know like maybe with like different like abled people, walking isn't an option. And if they are kind of with the assumption that there isn't going to be parking downtown, they might not see a point in even going to look or just like even coming down to downtown. So maybe like making it more aware, like I know like malls have like green light and red light. So maybe having some type of like signage at like the beginning of downtown or like when you're approaching that area, with like how many spots are available or something like that could like help.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be looking at like, that's all part of like managing our parking to make it, very user friendly. People don't have to like circle and circle, you know exactly where to go and what parking is available. Okay, Maya?
I don't know if this is possible, but maybe like a drop-off pickup zone somewhere like in the middle of the block. That way all people can just leave that way and it's not like a lot of traffic at the ends of the block where people are going to pick up their kids or family members.
Absolutely, and we've heard a lot about that in public comments, so that's something we'll be taking into consideration in the study. And these are all the things that we want to have available in our downtown. Where do these spaces go? Spaces like the loading spaces that make it, most user friendly, or being able to drop off, your grandmother, grandfather, maybe they're, they can't walk as far, so you drop them off first and you go park and you go meet them in the restaurant or things like that, just to make it easier and a lot more friendly. And feel like a very comfortable experience to take part in our downtown. So with that, I'm just going to do a time check and keep us on schedule because we have some more fun stuff for you this evening. I kind of did the Q&A, but if there's any final comments or thoughts before we move on, okay, we'll move on. So the next area that we want to talk to you about is the policy framework. And what do we mean by policy framework? The downtown specific plan is going to consist of goals. It's going to consist of policies, and the policies are basically what decision makers use and what staff use. When we open up a plan and we need direction on what do we do, well, the policies are going to point us in a certain direction for what the city should, how the city should expend its efforts, or how the city reacts to certain change that wants to happen in the downtown. And then it will have also implementation items. But before we even get to the goals and policies, we start first with vision. So every good plan has like this vision, like what do we want our downtown plan to become? And this is a really great quote I actually found in one of the states, the State Office of Planning and Research, opr.ca.gov, puts out a lot of really great articles on planning and doing general plan work and long range visioning. And I captured this particular quote, which says, "A city is not gauged by its length and width, but by the broadness of its vision and the height of its dreams." So what is our dream for downtown? And once we develop that identify what that is, that shared vision our community has for our downtown, that really inspires us to kind of then lead with that in mind as we develop goals. So I am going to turn it over to Akanksha, who's going to walk us through some of the policy framework that relates to some of the visioning and guiding principles homework exercise that we offered you. And again, if you haven't had a chance to turn that in, it's not too late. There's no grades. We want you to help us write the vision. We want you to help us write these policies, guiding principles, because then we're going to lead with that in mind. So Akanksha, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, good evening, everyone. So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into the specific plan components, and then we'll go over the vision statement and the guiding principles as part of your homework. So downtown specific plan essentially will be a planning document and a policy document, which will provide a framework of policies in different areas. So just starting with the vision statement, it's basically a statement that captures community's shared aspirations for the area. So in our case, it will have the shared hopes and aspirations for downtown. Based on the vision statement, we will have some guiding principles, which essentially focus on the values and priorities that guide the policy implementation. Based on the vision and the guiding principles, we'll have the goals and policies, and then the goals and policies will be diving into a number of different areas, starting with urban design and placemaking. So this is where the policies will provide direction on the public gathering spaces, the key landmarks and mobility options, gateways, and wayfinding. Public gathering spaces, which will include a focus on the Harrington Park, Laurel Street, new public plaza on the 600 block of Laurel Street, and programming for these spaces in the downtown. Moving on, we'll have policies for the streetscape improvements, so how the streets and alleys are designed, and going into the details of emergency access, beautification, and amenities and maintenance. We'll also have policies on mobility and micro-mobility. So again, how are we accommodating the pedestrians, bicyclists, public transit, motorists, etc. And the policies will also focus on parking regulation and management, for which Lisa provided a background on how the studies will kind of help guide and give direction for parking and management. We'll also have objective design standards, which are basically the rules of development of the built form. So it will include the illustrative graphics on the building facades, the heights, ground floor uses, etc. Moving on, we'll also have infrastructure and recommendations for capital improvements. So how will the public infrastructure evolve and support the vision of the downtown? And then finally, we'll have the phasing and implementation strategy to accomplish the plan's goals and vision. So diving a little bit deeper into the vision, we started asking the question from the community during the last community meeting that what is the most important element or feature you would like to incorporate in the downtown vision? And these are some of the keywords we've heard. It should be a place for gathering, should be walkable, accessible, safe, inviting, etc. And then we gave you the homework assignment of coming up with a vision statement and guiding principles. So we kind of took all of that in, and we received some really great responses from some of you in terms of what the vision statement should capture. And I'm going to share this, basically what is a working draft of the vision statement that we will together, wordsmith and evolve as we move ahead in the planning process. So the proposed statement reads, downtown is the heart of San Carlos that provides a vibrant, pedestrian-friendly, safe, and accessible destination for the community. It is a place for celebration that offers diverse and authentic experiences through a draw of food, services, art, and music in a visually attractive environment. The public realm in downtown provide inviting gathering spaces for people of all ages and culture. It is supported by a sustainable design and landscaping that supports ecological and community health and well-being. And we will be inviting your feedback on this in just a moment. Next, moving on to the guiding principles, and again, these are like working draft, very rough and guiding principles that will kind of, form the basis for policies and goals, but this is just a starting point. So what we heard was the specific plan should be a plan that is responsive to community aspirations, that fosters a sense of community, celebrates Laurel Street as the heart of downtown. It's vibrant and attractive. The downtown kind of is vibrant and attractive, a local and regional destination. It fosters connectivity and accessibility to and from downtown and with the adjacent neighborhoods. It celebrates downtown's public spaces. It's sustainable, equitable, and resilient. Embrace and fosters walkability, bikeability, and transit access. Revitalize streets and alleyways to enhance their function and beauty, and improve parking management and wayfinding. So again, this captures some of the priorities that we heard for the specific plan. And with that, I would open it up for discussion for both vision and guiding principles. And you should have printouts of these in your handouts. We want to basically hear, does this really capture the vision that you have for the downtown? Are we missing anything? Can we add something? Can we edit something? So I'll start with the vision first.
This is services meant to include shopping, like retail.
Yes. So we have food services, but that's a good point. We can add that in. Something about the shopping experience.
I was gonna say retail.
Yeah.
Retail.
Is there a way, Lisa, to edit this on screen? Can we put like a Word document in there?
Yes, for sure. We can just.
Maybe we just add stuff as people suggest it, and so they can see their edits.
Yeah, so maybe I can start.
Are you comfortable with that?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, good. I'm ready. What happened?
Actually lost it. Maybe sure.
When you escape, maybe it's reading right. Hold on a second. I wonder if it only will read it when we have it in presentation.
It's back.
Yeah. Actually,
Are you in PowerPoint yet?
I think we can.
You're in PowerPoint, it will only throw to the second screen if you're in presentation mode.
Yeah.
So if you go to regular, if you exit out of there, will you be able to edit?
I think, what can we edit this? Here, can we just, I don't know, state now. Yeah, we're in well, maybe what we can do, everybody has it in front of them, right? Right, so what we can do is we can just take a minute and exit out of it, but it turns it off here. And as we get your feedback, we can be editing it here and then we'll pop it up on the screen. So we'll show it to you. So, how about that? Will that work? Yeah. Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I have a monkey wrench here.
We're informal here, we're a working group, so. So yeah, so we essentially just want to know what's missing, what could be added. And there's really, no pressure here. It's not like we have to finish this tonight, but let's just have fun, explore. If we have thoughts or questions about what these things mean, let's just dive into it and talk about that. So,
I think what makes San Carlos really attractive and popular in the Bay Area is its small town feel and farm. And that's something that we would probably want to keep intact while we make all these changes and embrace this plaza, modernizing it. So I would want to see charm injected in our mission statement, but also embracing technology, because this is a 20-year plan. And I know we don't have any parking, paid parking right now. And eventually we may end up like, in San Mateo where they have an app for parking. Eventually, like Wheeler Plaza, if it gets really crowded in here, there are some cities, I think in Berkeley, where some of the parking places, you can reserve ahead of time. So charm and embracing technology, I mean, they kind of like contradict each other, but we want the old new.
Unique.
I was gonna say, the local businesses, I would like to say that we're a community who supports and fosters, local businesses to help them thrive.
How about Samina, while you're typing?
And two things, one is maybe including that we are in like adaptable downtown, like we're flexible, we're gonna meet the needs of the community as they change, like it's feasible. And then also, I think that this might just be me, but the second to last sentence doesn't really like make sense. I don't know if it's like either the grammar or just like the way it's phrased.
Yeah, they're like really working draft.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think maybe
yeah.
making it more like the public part of downtown provides like an inviting space for people of all ages and cultures instead of like gathering, because I don't think a lot of people gather at downtown, they just go there, like get stuff done or whatever, so just making it a little more vague might make it a little more inclusive.
Inviting spaces for all ages.
So we
I
could
like
just
the
say,
What was the word thing on the page before? Where was that?
For the word cloud.
Yeah, what was that? Was that actually quantified? Is
Yeah.
gathering the biggest because people said it the most, or is it because people?
Yeah.
Liked it the most?
exactly, yeah, so it's what people said the most. So gathering is what we heard a number of times, walkability, accessibility, safety, yeah. So it's based on the community feedback received during the community meeting in February.
And if I had to provide some sort of guess, it's not a guess, but like where did the word gather come about? It really had to do with the idea of programming the spaces that we have, like how do we come together and enjoy, the offerings that the Parks Department puts together, that, it's if there's a farmer's market or there's the art and wine walk, or maybe you can have a movie in the park, or what we heard from the community, that the activities that they would like to see more of downtown could include art exhibits, culture exhibits, kind of programming the spaces, these new spaces that we are going to, plan for and embrace in the downtown. What can we do with them? Maybe not 24/7, but programming them sometimes. So I think that's where the term gather came from.
They were looking for places, I remember some of the early feedback on this area, they were looking for places to bring their families to downtown. They were going to Redwood City to do stuff because they didn't have stuff to do downtown to gather. And like movies and movie nights and.
I feel like the word gathering is very formal and like part of like what, I don't remember what your name was, sorry. Cecilia, sorry, but we were saying like wanna, or maybe it was Donna. They were saying that like it was about like wanting to have charm, and I feel like having like a very formal word kind of takes away from that charm. So maybe like instead of gathering, just like finding another way that like I really like inviting. I think that has like some charm to it, just like gathering close rigid.
Maybe also in terms of like community-licensing and growing community, because this is a plan for the future and it's not just limited to what downtown is now. So maybe like urbanizing or growing or expanding community, like something like that.
Uniqueness.
How do you incorporate this? How do you word it? Like when I think of plazas, gathering spaces, which are really term I just came back from 3 weeks in Spain, right? And there's no parklets, but there's umbrellas everywhere, right? So people gather in plazas with umbrellas and cables rather than parklets. So nothing's blocked. You can see, you can see people. But people go there just hang watch other people go there and hang. Right, and I know it's kind of a cultural thing, right, but there's something that San Carlos, I'd love to see it be known for something other than got some great restaurants,
Just to hang out.
right? And
Great art.
I think we are missing the art and music piece that we can take advantage of, especially if we open up the plazas on a more consistent basis. Other than just the wine,
Yeah.
our wine, but something where San Carlos, yeah, is a great jazz festival, a great bluegrass festival every year. Not a festival, but some sort of thing where you're gathering people in the community that have talents.
So I'm
Okay?
just kind of calling the order as saw the hands done. I would you like to?
And we become known for that,
Yeah.
right? Not necessarily every night, but on occasion.
Thank you.
So if your survey indicates the word gathering was the most common word used, I mean, I feel like you could actually insert it in that sentence that says it is a place for celebration and gathering that offers diversity. Diverse company experience. So that might be more fitting. I just want to say what Jim was speaking to. In my time, trying to do a little bit of the homework before coming here tonight, I actually went down and looked at a lot of the downtown area peninsula, and what I found was very common what Jim just said. I know we talked about the parklets earlier, but that openness of the umbrellas. And I don't know how it's sustainable year round during the winter that they actually allow gathering next to the restaurants and so forth. But anyway, that I just wanted to. But.
Thank you, Tana. So being able to move to the next.
This kind of ties back to like what James was saying about like incorporating more of like the arts and music, but maybe having some type of like. This is like a very like specific idea, but having like a blank wall or some type of like projector or something outdoors, maybe that's near a parking lot, so we can have like drive-in movies or kind of like some type of movie night. Cause I know like people go watch Netflix or they, you know, go to movies, but there's something really fun about like being outdoors and it's like kind of cold and you're snuggled up. So like maybe having some type of like gathering space that can be like used for like art competition or like talent shows or concerts, but also for like movies to kind of tie back to the technology and adaptability.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that St. Carlos downtown when I sit across from the city has is that square. I would say that you're a square. St. Carlos or downtown is fairly linear.
But here.
In the park. Yeah.
You know, all year, so, yeah, you know, we have to remember that we do a lot of those activities at Burton that we're now trying to put. You know, downtown, because the summer we have the concerts, we have movies, you know, they have other things, you know, every Friday and stuff at Burton. Which draws huge crowds, if you look at our turnout at Friday night concerts, it's huge.
And it's not too far from downtown, and we were thinking about that too. When we think about the downtown, it's not just a walled space, right? How does it connect with and interact with? It's kind of like the adjacent immediate surroundings. And what's happening around it that, you know, we can try and create some interrelatedness or connection, or like even the streets around the civic center, we want to make sure when people are downtown, I know there's a civic center. So we're thinking about, you know, unifying the look and feel of the streets and signage to kind of really create a connection and sort of kind of celebrate and, you know, make known that we have these other great spaces right around the downtown, like Burton Park, where there's a lot of fun things that happen. Yeah.
I also wanted to say that if I remember the beginning meetings, people were talking that they would just like spaces, like if they bring their lunch. That there's a place to go sit, if you have a box, if you work downtown and you bring your lunch to work. You know, where can you go sit outside for your lunch hour, or people who work in the area? And eat, you know, a lot of people you see pick up lunch at Bianchini's and they're sitting on those park benches eating it, you know, right there. So to me, part of what we need those places is just open seating that people can do. You know, I'm not sure how, when I think of gathering, that's also part of what I think of is, you know, gee, you know, if I have a coffee break, I could go out and sit outside for 15 minutes if there's nice open tables or space.
That's, I think it's very different, that area.
You know, yeah, that's more welcoming with tables place for people to eat their own, what they've bought.
So we're hearing like spaces for relaxation and enjoyment.
Yeah, not just, you know, restaurant outdoor seating, but just independent, where
Public seating.
public seating where you can. have-
So we drifting a little bit, kind of giving specific ideas. Just trying to get back.
Clarify, there's a couple more things on our agenda, but I just want to make sure we hear from any, maybe what we can do is do some, not final comments, but any comments for now. And then we're gonna move on
To guiding
the guiding
principles.
principles, and then we need to, so I'm doing a time
Yeah.
check for the streets as well. So let's take maybe
You know, Elizabeth had her hand up
okay,
for.
how about Jean? Actually, Jean had her hand up.
One of the things I'd like to see now, the Laurels, that the 700 block is closed, is to make apartments are there a little more open rather than those closed boxes that they are, and make them a little bit more open. And then the other thing would be to have some tables with umbrellas in the middle of the street. Because right now it's a free for all for kids on bikes and scooters. And you have to be really careful depending on the time of day that you're down there on Laurel Street. So those are a couple things that strike me. And so if somebody does go buy a sandwich at Bianchini's, they can walk, 100 yards down the street or up the street, depending on your point of view, and sit at a picnic table with an umbrella, rather than out in the sun or, on the park bench, curb or something like that. It seems to me that now that it's closed, to make it inviting for people to spend time gathering, if you will, and on Laurel Street.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest, one of the there's so many wonderful comments that we're getting. But that one was definitely mentioned multiple times, is that you shouldn't have to pay to sit outside, there definitely is some places for people to sit and enjoy and just be and, watch people go by and, enjoy life. Okay, we'll take a few more and
Yes.
let's see, Cecile and then Maya and Samina and then we'll move on, yeah?
Sure.
So I love the idea of having shade, for like in the summer, as opposed to just eating umbrellas. However, I'm opposed to like the wear and tear and, one more thing to maintain and, umbrellas, like my umbrella at home. It lasts like a whole season, just one season, just for the entire summer, spring or summer. And by the following season, it just totally looks faded and outdated. It just looks grungy. And that's one more thing for us to think about. We want to be sustainable and thinking of the environment, but that's but at the same time, we want it to be pleasantly looking and attractive. Is there a way to have a more permanent way, more of a trellis is really doesn't give a whole lot of shade. But what do other cities do that's more permanent? And also when you look at many umbrellas from afar, it's not very attractive. It just looks like kind of umbrellas, kind of in my view.
Unless they're in Spain. That's cool.
Well, anywhere in Europe, you go walk through at nighttime, you see them, they all belong to the restaurants. Right? They take it out. Guys and gals out and take it out every night. And they're not sold to people, they're really good umbrellas, right?
I think the essence of what you're saying is that making sure that whatever design elements or components that we choose, that there's some longevity. to that.
And it's not just hodgepodge.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Same
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Same example.
Okay, two more and then we're gonna.
Oh, and I was gonna mention, Concha, maybe if we could see the vision statement now after having heard some comments.
Yeah, so you just put it back in presentation mode and it should go up on the screen. And I took a lot of notes, so we'll continue to
work on this. Sorry.
So you'll see some more words. Downtown is the heart of San Carlos that provides a vibrant, pedestrian-friendly, safe, charming, futuristic, and accessible destination for the community. It is a place for celebration and gathering that offers diverse and authentic experiences through a draw of food, retail, services, art, and music in a visually attractive environment for the growing community. The public realm in downtown provides inviting spaces for people of all ages and cultures. It is supported by a sustainable design and landscaping that supports ecological and community health and well-being. And we did hear some ideas around programming and places for enjoyment and relaxation. So maybe we'll again continue to develop and evolve this vision statement. So yeah, I think with that, we also have guiding principles, but I'm doing a time check here. Maybe we invite comments after the meeting on them. Yeah. Yeah, you can email us your comments on the guiding principles and you should have them in your handouts. Yeah, so by 2 weeks, I'm not sure if we had a date in mind, or after the long weekend, the July 4th weekend, I think it's July 7th. Okay. So with that, I hand it back to Lisa for urban design ideas for the street.
Now you got our brains going.
Plans aren't made overnight and, it takes some time to talk through them. This has been so much fun. I hope you're all enjoying your evening with us. Okay, so moving on to additional work in progress. And what we are also looking at or starting to think about very seriously is design ideas for the remaining streets in downtown. Particularly, because the 700 block is right in the middle of 6 and 8. So what needs to happen, or what are we thinking about for the 6 and 8? And then what are we really thinking about for, we can call it our gateway street into the downtown, which are the first block of San Carlos Avenue, the 1100 and the 1200 blocks really kind of make up that entryway, kind of that gateway moment into the downtown area. And then there's all these other streets, as we just mentioned before, there's like 30 different intersections, many different street segments in and around downtown. And what we've heard a big takeaway at the business community and also in public comments and from our Planning and Transportation Commission and City Council is that all of these streets need to kind of work together. They need to dance together. They need to look good together and connect, so that when you're in the downtown, you're part of this larger network. So by all means, we are not just going to be focusing on Laurel Street. We're also going to be thinking about the 600 block, including maybe perhaps potential closure for the 600 block. So just a couple of slides to share, the existing conditions of the street. We're all fairly familiar, but we have diagonal parking on the 600 block. There's some bulb outs to make the crossing shorter, which is great, for pedestrians, to get quickly across the street. We got some street trees there. But what else could happen to these streets to make them inviting, more inviting for all modes of travel, and to really make space for, all the different activities and foot traffic that wants to occur in these areas. And that goes, the same for the 800 block of Laurel. On the 800 block of Laurel, probably, one of the biggest, if you think of it from a space standpoint or a size standpoint, is bianchinis and how people get in and out of bianchinis. And, does it make sense to close the 800 block? Maybe not, because of, you have, our local market, our one and only downtown market, really, that's situated in a way where it lends itself to be more accessible through cars. But how could that street transform over time and to really be unified with the 700 block and the 600 block? And then again, kind of recognizing this gateway moment into the city where we have, 2 lanes in both directions. We have sidewalks there, but they're fairly narrow. Maybe we could benefit by having wider sidewalks and maybe kind of rearranging some of the parking spaces, figuring out what to do with the parklets, maybe getting them off this busier street and onto the sidewalk. When there's just an image of the 1200 block at San Carlos Avenue, where, you know, we have a really kind of beautiful median in place. It's a lot of trees, but again, how can this area function into an area with, you know, that can accommodate more foot traffic and wider sidewalks. So as we begin to explore what could happen to the different streets in downtown, you know, there's many examples, as Jim just mentioned, just in Spain, or in Barcelona, Spain or Barcelona, either one, you know, there's beautiful streets, and you know, obviously Europe is it has great examples of wonderful spaces, you know, for people to be in and enjoy and eat and shop and dine and, you know, ride their bikes and just have a wonderful experience. So these are offered just to kind of like spark our imagination for of looking at streets in a different way, where they are more shared with different modes of travel, you know, maybe where they aren't all given away to just vehicle movement, but can also accommodate bicyclists and pedestrians in a way that really kind of creates, you know, some life and presence on the street. It's a place where you want to go and be and enjoy time with your friends. And, you know, after all, I often think about this, every plan or transformation that we do, you know, we should think about ourselves first. We're planning for us, for people, and the spaces that we enjoy being in, and what's comfortable and safe and inviting for ourselves. So streets really can be, and there's, again, great examples of how they're really designed in a way to accommodate, you know, people more than cars, or cars maybe are secondary. So there's some examples of what this could look like. This is an example of a shared street. It could be anywhere. It's just a rendering of a shared street in downtown, where there's space for delivery trucks to come through and offload, where cars go through, and where there's also people friendly as well. This kind of just shows a lot of different activities that could take place. And we could end up in a situation where maybe the 600 block could be closed some of the times, opened other times, or in a space where really the vehicle is kind of tamed in such a way where the lanes are much more narrow and the sidewalks are much wider. And with narrow lanes, people, when you drive through them, you drive slower, and kind of create a different kind of feel for what the 600 block and some other blocks along Laurel Street could look like and be designed into. So as we just kind of finish this kind of like you know, lift to kind of see what we could do with the 700 block, we're also going to be looking at the other streets. So again, this, you know, 700 block is not the only street that's going to be evaluated. This is an example of a two-way street, a busier street in the downtown. This could be an example perhaps for San Carlos Avenue. I talked about in the traffic study that we're looking at putting San Carlos on a road diet, meaning narrowing the lanes. And when you narrow the lanes, you can get other elements onto that right of way, including wider sidewalks, space for streetscape amenities like light fixtures, you know, benches, trees. Also be able to fit in dedicated bike lanes, some parking, about enough space for transit to take place, and maybe bulb outs, making it more pedestrian friendly, making those crossings a little bit shorter, especially for those that maybe can't get across as fast as others. So these are examples that we are exploring. And when we come back to the DTAC at a future date, we are going to be sharing some of these street concepts for the other blocks. But I wanted to let you know that we are working on these. We had heard some comments from the community that they feel we're only focusing on 700. Are there more plans for the other streets? And so the answer to that is absolutely yes. And so we wanted to share that with all of you tonight, and you know, see if you have any thoughts or perspectives or things that you'd like for us to think about as we're considering the 600 block. I mean, what ideas might you have? As well as the 800 block and the first two blocks of San Carlos Avenue. So with that, I will stop and see if there are any questions, observations, thoughts. Again, this is a starting point for us, so we are really interested in kind of hearing your feedback and kind of integrating that into our work. Again, this is not the final opportunity, of course, but this is an iterative process, so it always is a great opportunity to kind of get your feedback early on. So with that, Samina.
So I had a question in terms of like, how are we gonna incorporate spaces for youth to use? Because it seems like everything in this meeting has been focused on like, more like concrete gathering areas, and like, for example, the idea to kind of take that like middle area and have it like filled with tables, umbrellas, chairs. I'm kind of like wondering, where are like the youth who like to bike around San Carlos or skateboard around San Carlos, where are they going to go? And then also in terms of like diversity of the businesses at San Carlos downtown, how are we going to make sure that there are places for youth? I know, I think it was in the previous DTAC meeting, someone mentioned the youth center. And that's a great option, but it's mostly geared towards middle schoolers, and kind of also the idea of having like elementary kids and like high schoolers in the same area that's like confined to this one building is a little bit scary for a lot of parents. It's like, how do we incorporate like parts of the downtown that can be more geared towards elementary schoolers or middle schoolers, and then also high schoolers?
And what I would be interested in is figuring out what are the kinds of activities that the youth would be interested in. I mean, what are you drawn to? What are you attracted to? What would make it, what would you consider something fun to do? Or are there examples of other downtowns or cities that you go to because they have, you know, something there that draws you to it? One of the things that I can mention is that our Parks and Recreation Department is going to be undertaking a parks master plan update. So it's not just parks, but it's all of the programs in addition, because for anyone that may not know, it's our Park and Recs department that puts together all of the activities, the programming of everything that happens with Burton Park. So they're going to be updating their plan. This is a city council strategic objective, so they're going to be starting that process in the very near future. So it would be great to, you know, get plugged into that process and think about, you know, how the city is using its current inventory of parks and spaces like the youth center. And also, you know, there's this idea of creating, a long-term goal for creating a community center here in San Carlos. And then how could that space be programmed? But we definitely are interested in learning what uses may be missing in the downtown. Like Jim, you were just saying, you know, we don't want to be known as just a downtown to eat. There's like a lot of other things, there's like a lot of different activities that could occur in downtown other than just eating, as much as we enjoy eating. But what else? What else is missing? So this is a great comment that you made. And so absolutely, we want to hear from you, share your thoughts and ideas, because depending upon the comments that you give, some of them are going to land more in like land use. And like if there's a use that we hadn't thought of, or maybe that we don't think about allowing in downtown, maybe we want to reconsider that and allow some of those uses to be in downtown. Maybe not necessarily in the public spaces, but you know, where a business owner or proprietor could make an offering that would be interesting for the youth. So Al?
And Lisa, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the other plaza in the 600 block and the determination of how to approach that space.
Yes, that's a good point, because we have this brand new space, right, that has not been designed. The parking, the temporary parking that is there now will eventually go away. So we have the opportunity to think about how we want to design that space, what we want to include in it. And there's so many different ideas. So I think it's really important for us to be able to capture those ideas, and where, you know, how the downtown plan can guide and suggest and give ideas for the programming of these spaces, because then we're going to take it to our Parks and Rec director and their department, and they're really the ones that are going to help us program those spaces.
And that's the space behind Blue Line. Right?
Yes, and just to make sure everyone knows, it's on the 600 block. It's right in between, it's the parking lot, yeah. It's right in between Blue Line Pizza and the new and upcoming Paris Spaghetti, which I don't know when they're opening. I know they're working on it, but it could be soon. So that's where that public plaza will take place. And Mark?
This might go a little bit beyond obviously current obvious downtown boundaries. But we're also building where Kelly Moore factory used to be. We're building a biotech center that's also going to have a lot of public space and outdoor. Might be interesting to consider making the Arroyo underpass a second gateway into the city. I'm sorry.
This side,
Oh.
yeah, closer to.
On the east side,
Yeah.
yes, so we currently have the Arroyo underpass that connects the east side to the downtown.
Right,
And so-
right now it's a. I don't think it's a Superfund site, but it's close to it's lane dormant, but eventually that's gonna be built out with a ton of publicly displayed art and perhaps restaurants, shops, cafes there.
Correct, yeah, there's new development happening on that side.
Adjunct down.
And on the other side, with that new development, they are including what we refer to in our vision plan for that area as an activity hub, so cafes that can really anchor, that's that intersection on Old County Road and Commercial as you make your way through the Arroyo underpass and into downtown. So that's a really great comment, and what a wonderful idea to kind of really use that underpass and the Arroyo Street as kind of like a visual marker, or kind of punctuate that in some way to make it like an obvious connection from the downtown into these future spaces that we're going to have some open spaces. And that's one of the things we're not talking about in this project, but there's a whole lot of new development coming in that's really opening up their development in a way where there's going to be publicly accessible spaces with cafes and art and, stages, and all of this would be open to the community. So I think a big part of what we do is really about also thinking about the connections of the downtown to these other wonderful spaces that will be offerings in our community as well. Maya, sorry.
I think another nice way to kind of incorporate like the 600 and 800 block is maybe making it a closed street just for the weekend. So then when like Saturday and Sunday people, that both of those streets will be closed down for vehicles, and then maybe that'll encourage like foot traffic for the farmers market, for example. And then another idea I had was maybe putting up like directories of where the businesses are, like at the beginning of the streets. That way it can show people where parking is or different businesses are, and kind of encourage them to look at the directory and then walk around and visit these shops.
Great comment. Monette?
I know you were talking about possibility of closing 800, but with the post office there, can you even do that?
Legally, right?
Yeah, do that when you have to give access to people to the post office?
Yeah, and actually, if I didn't make that clear, I was thinking that the 800 block would probably not be like the best fit, simply because of the uses that are on that block. Because we have the post office, because we have the market, places that may be more car dependent, right? You can't just put all your groceries on your bicycle or carry them away. Or your packages, exactly. So, but we still want to beautify the 800 block, and maybe there's an opportunity to make the sidewalks wider, maybe rearrange some parking, give it the same type of sidewalk treatment and the furnishings and lighting, and really beautify that space. Yeah, but maybe not close it. Yeah.
My other thing is, we're talking about closing and all that, is the cross streets like Cherry and those is what you do to those intersections to make it, like if those side streets are still viewable, and especially now there's a light at El Camino, so we have to really think about how pedestrian traffic on a closed street is going to interact with those cross streets.
Exactly, and that's one of the benefits of doing the traffic study. It's going to look at all of that. Yeah. And Cecilia, you had your
Community events are really a big draw here in San Carlos, and the parking area by Blue Line. There was an event last year. I think it was the night, the light holiday. Around the holiday, and they converted it like there were like some rides in there, miniature and like carnival rides. Back then, and I think one potential, and as we have more community events, also last year, we had the Arts and Wine, and we had a lot of different bands perform during the all weekend long. The stages were really put to good use, but those were like temporary stage, and to have like a community, a city, a downtown stage that's permanent, that's there all the time, where we gather, like, you know, whether it's to kick off an event would be, I think, a great idea.
Wonderful. Yeah, great comment. I'm gonna go to this side and then I'll jump back. Allison?
Yeah, the one thing that occurs to me when people are talking about gathering spaces, like, oh, the number of people in a group, I don't think is often thought about by planners and restaurant folks. I came from a family of 6. There was never a place for us to sit anywhere. It was no one, right? It was like, the parents would sit over there and we'd be at the kids' table. And I know most family sizes are relatively small, but thinking about kids, you have a group of 6 friends. And so like, someone's got to sit over there, or like, it's like, there's not a place for all of you, you sit, so we move on. So maybe that's something we can think about in the seating that's not paid for play, right? This is the public seating. And it's not just like, oh, a picnic table, done, but like, no, it should have some shade, there should be like a water feature, it should be a cool place to hang out. I don't know if you've ever been to field work in San Mateo over that Bayview like area. So popular year round, people are even like blown and they're freezing, but they don't care because you can bring your dog and your kids and they can play in this safe enclosed area, and there are tables where 8 people can sit. So if we can think about very large tables, very large gathering spaces where it's not like someone drags away the chair and now it's abandoned tables, it's like a plan for larger groups. Like, don't just think about groups of 2 or family of 4, but larger groups intentionally have spaces for them and they will fulfill them.
It's a great comment. I love that. And yes, Fieldworks is wonderful. I've been there once and I was so excited to visit. I'm like, wow, what a wonderful space. Maya, I'm so sorry.
Just another quick comment. Would it be possible to make the parking lot of Bianchini's like a parking structure? That way we can have like people park on multiple levels. So then, because I know right now that portion's reserved just for Bianchini's, and then the back is always packed for people who want to hang out in the 800 block. So maybe that could encourage more parking.
Yeah, so that's private property. So if the property owner approaches the city with an idea to kind of redevelop the site, we would definitely work with them. But those,
The back part's public.
the back part is a public, the city-owned public parking lot.
So
Yeah,
that could be.
Yeah, a portion of it is Bianchini's and a portion of it is the city's, but we're gonna count all that and get very clear on who owns what, but definitely. Okay, I'm gonna do a quick time check because I'm just want to make sure I respect everybody's time. It is 8 o'clock and we didn't want to keep you here too long past 8. So if you are all open, I can take a few more comments and then maybe we'll wrap it up for this evening. We'll put together all of our notes that you provided, all the inputs we provided, and then we will continue to work on the different components of the plan before we come back to you with a lot more information. So with that, are there any final comments that anybody wants to make? Samina, you want to make one? And by the way, I just want to say that you're welcome to email us anytime. Like if you go on a summer trip and come back and go, oh my gosh, I just wanted to share this with you, you can email us anytime. With the homework assignment and the guiding principles, I think what would be helpful for us if for that, I do want to, there needs to be a cutoff period eventually. So I want to say maybe like, why don't we say July 10th, Monday, July 10th. I think that gives everybody like maybe 2.5 weeks. And it's not the end because you're going to look at the vision statement, and there'll be drafts of the plan. But this will help us to kind of really make sure we're not missing anything or any comments from anyone else that may want to offer them for the vision or the guiding principles. And we'll email that out, the July 10th reminder date for that. But in terms of any other ideas or comments you want to offer, you're always welcome. But Samina, go ahead.
We were like kind of saying we wanted to make downtown like a more like bigger area, kind of incorporate like the library, the ACC, kind of the civic center. So maybe we could have like e-bikes or scooters, or I think they're like birds throughout that area to encourage like not just like walking or like scootering through that main downtown, but also like to the library or to other places, which might make it more accessible for people who maybe can't walk for like as long of distances.
Great comment. Yeah, and these are all of like what we refer to now as micro mobility. They're in different cities, and so they're really convenient. You just hop on one and you leave it in a spot where no one would trip, and then you
Except for
move
lots
on.
of birds. Had that experience for everything, the birds.
To the comment.
Yeah.
Two things. One, thank you for incorporating all this and allowing us to participate in this. I think it's great. I think it's a shame that some people don't show up, and it's just a great opportunity. They're on the committee and they should show, and maybe they're communicating you through mail. The other one is whoever executed on getting rid of the orange barriers. Nice job.
I will make sure to pass that on. Yes, I know.
White, planners look so much better. So.
Yes.
I heard that was
Thank
all
you.
house supplies.
Take the question.
It was there in oversight. Mother Trip flowers.
I had a couple friends who go on this committee said, hey, thanks for getting that done, Joe. I'm going, I have nothing to do with that. I can talk to somebody else. It's like, smile.
Yeah, I let them know the fireworks are coming, the big firework changes.
That's good. That's great.
I will make sure to pass that on to our Public Works team. They will very much appreciate that. Okay, so with that. Why, did my presentation.
Much better in person.
Yes, the meeting is much better in person.
Meeting you all out of a box.
Well, it doesn't seem to want to move, but the last items on the agenda for to see it, because we're a Brown Act committee, the DTAC is a Brown Act committee. So any member of the public could come and observe and share their public comments, but I don't see anybody in the public here tonight, so we can pass that. So with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. We will be in communication with you over the summer. And be sure to give you adequate notice before we have our next meeting, that you all know and have an idea of what we'll be working on in the meantime. And so with that, feel free to reach out with any questions anytime, send us any thoughts or ideas that you continue to think about or come up. And with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. I think there's some, Lynette, there's some leftover to go boxes. If you want to take a little bit extra home, feel free to help yourself. And
Working to do the 10?
the 10th, July 10th, we'll send a reminder email. And once again, thank you all so much for spending the evening with us and your commitment and dedication to helping us with the downtown plan. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's